Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the chosen successor of Dr. Doom. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind on the roof was a lonely thing. It whispered past Izuku Midoriya's ears with a mournful sigh, a sound that mirrored the cavernous emptiness that had just been carved into his chest. Below, the city of Muzurifa hummed with the ceaseless energy of life. Cars, distant chatter, the faint, triumphant call of a siren that now felt like a personal insult. Life was going on, utterly indifferent to the fact that his own had just ended. He sank to his knees on the gritty concrete, the rough texture biting into the thin fabric of his school uniform. The smoke and stench of the sludge villain still clung to him, a putrid perfume of his failure. But that wasn't the smell that choked him. It was the phantom scent of ozone and righteous power, the ghost of All Might's presence. You cannot be a hero. The words weren't an echo. They were a brand seared directly onto his soul. They were spoken without malice, which somehow made them infinitely worse. It was a simple, pragmatic statement of fact from the one man whose opinion mattered more than the universe itself. A fact that confirmed every jeer from Kaken, every pitying look from his teachers, every sad, apologetic smile from his mother. He was quirkless. A blank slate in a world of vibrant color. An empty page in a library of epics. His trembling fingers fumbled for his backpack, pulling out the notebook. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. It was a pathetic sight. Soaked from the sewer, burned at the edges from Bakugo's casual cruelty. And now, utterly meaningless, he stared at the detailed drawing of Kamui Woods on the cover, his own childish handwriting annotating the hero's strengths and weaknesses. It was the work of a fool, a delusional child playing pretend. All his life, he had been preparing for a race he was never allowed to enter. He thought of Kaken's words from earlier that day, a lifetime ago. If you want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Believe that you'll have a quirk in your next life and take a swan dive off the roof. His gaze drifted to the edge of the building. It would be so easy. A single step. A brief, terrifying fall. And then, what? A chance? An escape? The thought was a cold, sharp splinter in his mind. He wasn't seriously considering it. He couldn't do that to his mom. But the very fact that the thought was there, hovering in the periphery of his despair, scared him more than any villain. It was the final admission of defeat. He clutched the notebook to his chest, a sob finally tearing its way out of his throat, raw and ragged. He cried for the little boy in the All Might onesie, for the years of pointless study, for the dream that was now a corpse at his feet. He cried until his eyes were raw and his throat ached, alone on a rooftop under a sky that was slowly bruising from orange to purple. He was so consumed by his own grief that he didn't notice the subtle distortion in the air a few feet away. He didn't see the shimmering, heat haze effect resolve itself into a small, metallic sphere no larger than a fist. It hovered silently, its multifaceted crystalline lens capturing every detail of the scene. The boy's biometrics, the stress indicators in his voice, the tear-streaked dirt on his face. It scanned the charred notebook, its internal processors cross-referencing the written language, the complexity of the diagrams, and the startlingly advanced tactical assessments within. Far away, in a place not of this world, a man watched the feed on a floating holographic display. He sat upon a throne of dark, polished metal, in a hall that was part medieval castle, part hyper-advanced laboratory. He wore armor of gleaming chrome, intricately engraved with patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in the low light. A tattered green cloak, the color of old jade, was clasped at his neck by two lion-headed medallions. His face was hidden behind an iron mask, cold and impassive, its expression fixed in a perpetual state of stern authority. Subject's psychological resilience is remarkable. A voice, his voice, intoned, the words filtered through a vocoder that gave them a metallic, resonant quality. Most would have shattered completely under this cumulative stress. Instead, he endures. The anomaly he had been tracking, a localized, repeatable tear in the dimensional fabric, had led him to this curious planet. He had observed it for weeks. A world teeming with genetically endowed superhumans who called themselves heroes and villains, playing out a chaotic, endless pageant of violence for the adulation of the masses. He found it inefficient, illogical, and profoundly decadent. the so-called symbol of peace, was a buffoon, a reactive force who solved problems with his fists but possessed no vision, no plan for true, lasting order. But this boy was different. The drone's deep-level analysis had confirmed it. His quirk factor was 0. A genetic throwback. Yet, his analytical capabilities were in the 99.9th percentile. His capacity for strategic thinking rivaled that of seasoned military commanders. And his will, the sheer, stubborn, irrational force of his will, was a power all its own. In a world obsessed with the biological lottery of quirks, they had overlooked a diamond because it did not glitter like cheap glass. A mind like that, shackled to a body deemed worthless by its society. The armored man mused, his gauntlet fingers tapping lightly on the arm of his throne. They seek to build a better world with fists and flashy powers, blind to the fact that the only tool that has ever truly shaped civilizations is the intellect. An intellect, and the will to use it. He made a decision. A brief gesture of his hand, a command sent across dimensions. Back on the rooftop, Izuku's sobs had subsided into shuddering breaths. He felt hollowed out, a fragile shell waiting to be swept away by the wind. That was when he heard it. Not a shout, not a heroic landing, but a soft, almost imperceptible thrum. The sound of displaced air, of power held in perfect, silent check. He looked up, his tear-swollen eyes blinking in confusion. A man was standing there. He hadn't been there a second ago. There was no door to the roof except the one behind him, which was still closed. He hadn't flown in. There was no gust of wind, no sound of jets. He was simply there, as if he had stepped out of the shadows themselves. He was tall and broad, a figure of imposing authority. His entire body was encased in shining, silvery armor that seemed to drink the fading light of the sunset. A deep green cloak, frayed and ancient-looking, billowed softly around him, held by golden clasps. But it was the mask that seized Izuku's attention, freezing the breath in his lungs. It was a mask of cold, unyielding iron, with a sharp nose and a grim, downturned mouth. There were no visible eyes, only dark, shadowed pits that seemed to stare right through him, weighing and measuring his very soul. He looked like a king from a dark fairy tale, a knight from a forgotten, brutal age. Izuku scrambled backward, his heart hammering against his ribs. A villain? A new hero? He didn't fit into any category Izuku knew. His mind, even in its grief-stricken state, went into overdrive, analyzing, cataloging. Appearance, full body armor, suggests high defense or life support. No visible support gear or weaponry, suggesting integrated systems. Cloak is purely aesthetic, possibly ceremonial. Stance is relaxed but perfectly balanced. He is not threatened by me. Who is he? The armored figure took a single, deliberate step forward. The sound of the metal boot on the concrete was a soft, solid clang. Izuku Midoriya, the figure said. The voice was deep, resonant, and filtered through the mask, giving it a metallic, otherworldly timbre. It was not a question. It was a statement. Izuku's blood ran cold. How did he know his name? Who are you? He stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The man tilted his head slightly, a gesture that was somehow both curious and condescending. I am many things. A scientist. A sorcerer. A monarch. But you, child, may call me Doom. Doom. The name meant nothing to Izuku, yet it settled in the air with the weight of a prophecy. I have been observing you. Doom continued, his voice calm and level, devoid of any emotion Izuku could recognize. Your pathetic, frantic rush into the fray to save your tormentor, your subsequent humiliation at the hands of your idol. A fascinating display of emotional fortitude. Most would have crumbled. Izuku flinched as if struck. Humiliation. That's what it was. He had been so blind, so desperate, he hadn't even seen it. I saw everything. Doom interrupted, his tone cutting. I saw a society of so-called heroes stand by and do nothing, paralyzed by the inadequacy of their own abilities. I saw their symbol of peace arrive late, his power a blunt instrument used to clean up a mess that better minds would have prevented. And I saw a quirkless child, with nothing but courage and a brilliant tactical mind, be the only one to act decisively. And for that you were chided. You were dismissed. You were told your dream was impossible. He gestured with a gauntlet hand toward the soggy notebook still clutched in Izuku's grasp. May I? It wasn't a request. Izuku felt an unseen force gently tugging the notebook from his hands. It floated through the air and into Doom's waiting palm. The armored monarch didn't even glance down at it. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. Doom read, though his head remained level. A misnomer. This is not a fan's idol worship. This is strategic deconstruction, your assessment of Eraserhead's dependency on his direct line of sight, and your proposed counter-strategy using reflective particulates to create sensory chaos, strategically sound. Your analysis of Endeavor's overheating flaw, with detailed thermal imaging projections and a plan to exploit it using concentrated cryo-agents, inspired. You do not see heroes, boy. You see systems. And you, better than any of them, understand how to break them. Izuku stared, dumbfounded. This stranger, this Doom, had understood his notebooks in a way no one ever had. He wasn't just seeing scribbles. He was seeing the strategy, the intellect, the work. For the first time all day, for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something that wasn't shame or despair. He felt seen. All Might was a fool, Doom stated, the finality in his tone leaving no room for argument. He saw a quirkless child. I see a mind that is a weapon in its own right. He told you that you cannot be a hero. He is correct, but for the wrong reasons. What do you mean? Izuku managed, his voice trembling. Doom took another step closer. He was an intimidating presence, a walking fortress of iron and will. The very concept of a hero in this world is flawed. They are reactive. They wait for disaster to strike, for villains to appear, and then they swoop in to battle them in the streets, causing untold property damage and celebrating their victory in front of news cameras. They are glorified gladiators, treating the symptom while the disease of societal decay festers unabated. He raised a finger, the metal tip gleaming in the twilight. A hero saves a single person from a falling building. A commendable, yet ultimately insignificant act. A true leader, a true savior, reinforces the foundations of every building in the city so that none may fall in the first place. He identifies the architectural flaws, the seismic vulnerabilities, the substandard materials, and he corrects them. The cost is the architect's freedom to be careless. The reward is absolute safety. That is the difference between a hero and a king. Between a symbol and a solution. Izuku's mind reeled. The analogy was cold, logical, and terrifyingly persuasive. He had spent his whole life wanting to be the man who saved the person from the falling building. He'd never once considered being the one to prevent the collapse. All Might. All Might saves people with a smile, Izuku said weakly, clinging to the last vestiges of his broken faith. He inspires hope. The hope for a savior is the last refuge of a populace that has forgotten how to save itself, Doom retorted dismissively. He provides a temporary emotional balm while the fundamental problems, crime, inequality, the very existence of villains, go unsolved. His smile is a mask to hide the fact that he has no plan. In my nation of Latveria, there is no crime. There is no poverty. There is no disease. My people do not need hope, because they have certainty. They have order. They have doom. Latveria? The name sounded foreign, strange. Izuku had never heard of it. Your nation, a paradise forged by a singular will. My will, Doom stated. He let the notebook float back into Izuku's lap. You have such a will, Izuku Midoriya, an iron will, trapped in a world that values only flesh and bone. They have told you that you are powerless. They are wrong. A quirk is a biological accident. True power is forged in the crucible of the mind, in the fire of ambition. He stood before Izuku now, looming over him not like a predator, but like a monument. I did not come here for you. I was tracking a cosmic disturbance that led me to this chaotic little world, but in you, I see a reflection. A kindred intellect. A will that refuses to be broken. I see potential that this world, in its blind obsession with genetic gifts, will squander. They will let you wither and die in obscurity. The air grew heavy, charged with a palpable energy. Izuku could feel the weight of the moment, the sense that his life was balanced on the knife's edge of this one conversation. I offer you a different path, Doom said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming almost conspiratorial. The dream you held is dead. Let it lie. I will give you a new one. I will not teach you to be a hero, chasing villains through the streets for scraps of public approval. I will teach you to be a king. I will give you access to knowledge that makes these quirks seem like children's party tricks. I will teach you the disciplines of science, from quantum mechanics to genetic engineering. I will teach you the arts of sorcery, the fundamental laws of magic that govern reality itself. I will give you the tools to build, to command, to conquer. He paused, letting the impossible words sink in. Science. Sorcery. Izuku's world, which had just shrunk to the size of a single rooftop, suddenly expanded to encompass the entire cosmos. You desire to save people, Doom continued. A noble, if naive, ambition. I will give you the power to save not just one person, or one city, but the entire world. To impose upon it a lasting peace, an order so absolute that the concept of a villain will cease to have meaning. An age of prosperity and advancement under a single, benevolent, iron fist. Izuku looked up at the impassive mask, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. This was madness. This man spoke of ruling the world, of magic and science beyond comprehension. He sounded like a villain from a comic book. But his logic, his cold, cutting logic had sliced through Izuku's grief and exposed the flawed, childish core of his dream. All Might had offered him a sad reality. Doom was offering him an impossible, terrifying purpose. I can't, Izuku began, but the words died in his throat. What was the alternative? To go home? To tell his mother his dream was dead? To go to a normal high school, get a normal job, and spend the rest of his life as Deku, the useless one, staring at the sky as others lived the life he so desperately wanted? To accept his powerlessness? No. Never. That was the one thing his will would not allow. Doom seemed to sense the shift, the flicker of defiance reigniting in the boy's eyes. He saw the iron in his soul. The world has denied you your dream, Izuku Midoriya, Doom said, his voice ringing with the finality of a judgment. It has cast you out and deemed you worthless. All Might has left you here, broken and alone. He extended a gauntlet hand. The polished metal shone like a dark mirror in the last rays of the sun, reflecting Izuku's own small, tear-streaked face. It was not the warm, reassuring hand of a hero. It was a hand of steel and circuits, of power and cold, hard reality. It was an offer. A contract. A new path, forged in iron. I will not leave you. I will reforge you. I will give you the power you crave, the purpose you have lost. They will not give you a place at their table, so we shall build a new table, and at its head you will sit. Doom's voice was the only sound in the universe. I will give you the world itself. Will you accept? The metal of the gauntlet was cold, a stark, unyielding reality against the back of Izuku's hand. It was not a comforting touch, not the warm reassurance of a hero. It was the touch of absolute certainty, a silent promise of power forged in logic and steel. In that single point of contact, Izuku felt the chasm between the world he knew and the world being offered to him. One was filled with comforting lies and broken promises. The other was a realm of cold, hard, terrifying truth. He looked up from the gleaming metal to the dark, unreadable eye slits of the mask. All his life, he had been waiting for someone to see him, to see past the label of quirkless, and recognize the fire within. All Might had seen only the label. This man, this impossible figure of iron and emerald, saw the fire and offered to give it fuel. The choice was no choice at all. It was an inevitability, the only logical conclusion to a lifetime of being denied. I accept, Izuku said. The words were quiet, hoarse from his earlier tears, but they echoed in the rooftop's silence with the weight of a vow. They were the three most important words he had ever spoken. Doom's hand did not shake his. It simply retracted, the gesture as economical and final as his speech. A wise decision. Your former life is now concluded. There is no returning to what you were. The finality of it hit Izuku like a physical blow. His mom. What would she think? She would wake up tomorrow and her son would be gone. The thought sent a spear of guilt and grief through him, a painful aftershock of the boy he used to be. My mother, he whispered, the name a prayer and an apology. I have to. I can't just leave. Sentiment is a weakness, Doom stated, though his tone was not entirely dismissive. It was analytical, as if observing a fascinating but flawed specimen. However, a clean severance is more efficient than a lingering mystery. A prolonged search by the authorities of this nation would be an unnecessary complication. You will leave a note. State that you have been accepted into a highly exclusive, all-expenses-paid international program for gifted students. A chance of a lifetime. A difficult thing for a loving mother to deny her son, is it not? You will frame it as your triumph, not your escape. It was a cruelly brilliant manipulation. It would give his mother hope instead of despair. It would make her proud, even as it broke her heart. It was the first bitter taste of the Latvian doctrine, the application of cold logic to the messy, unpredictable landscape of human emotion. Doom gestured to the stairwell door. You have 10 minutes. Do not be late. My time is not a resource to be squandered. With a final, lingering look at the armored monarch, Izuku scrambled to his feet and rushed home. The run was a blur, his legs pumping on autopilot while his mind raced. He burst into his empty apartment, the familiar scent of home now feeling alien and accusatory. He found a pen and paper, his hands shaking so violently he could barely write. Mom, something amazing has happened. Remember how I've always studied and worked so hard? Someone noticed. A scout from a very prestigious international institute. They specialize in advanced sciences and global policy. They saw my analysis work and they've offered me a full scholarship. It's in Europe. It's a chance to learn, to become someone who can really make a difference, even without a quirk. He paused, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. I know it's sudden. They're moving fast. I have to leave tonight. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you in person. Please don't worry. I'll be safe. I'll be able to contact you once I'm settled. This is my dream, Mom. A new dream. Please be proud of me. I love you more than anything. Izuku. He folded the note and left it on the kitchen table, next to the all-might salt shaker. The pathetic irony was not lost on him. He took one last look around the apartment, a museum of his dead dream, the posters and figurines now mocking him. He didn't take anything. The boy who lived here was gone. He ran back to the rooftop, arriving with seconds to spare, his lungs burning. Doom stood exactly where he had left him, a statue of patience. He gave Izuku a slight nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, not of praise. You are punctual. The first lesson of discipline, Doom said. He raised his gauntlet, and the air in front of him began to shimmer and tear, a swirling vortex of green and gold energy, crackling with power that made the hair on Izuku's arms stand on end, opened before them. It was a portal. A real, honest-to-God magic portal. The universe is grander and more complex than your physicist's dream, Doom said, gesturing towards the rift. Step through. Your education is about to begin. Izuku hesitated for only a heartbeat, then stepped across the threshold. The sensation was indescribable. A feeling of being turned inside out and reassembled, a lurching transit through dimensions that were not meant for human perception. He stumbled out onto solid ground, gasping, his vision swimming. When his eyes focused, he forgot how to breathe. He stood on a balcony of black marble, overlooking a city unlike any he had ever seen. It was night here, but the city glowed with a clean, white light. Gleaming spires of chrome and glass scraped the sky, connected by graceful, sweeping bridges and silent, floating transit pods. The architecture was a severe, majestic blend of Gothic grandeur and futuristic efficiency. Below, the streets were wide, spotless, and patrolled not by police cars, but by silent, humanoid robots of green and silver, their single red optic eyes sweeping over the populace. And the people, they walked with purpose. There was no loitering, no shouting, no crime. Everyone was clothed, fed, and employed. He saw public gardens, automated street cleaners, and medical drones making house calls. There was no trash, no graffiti, no sign of urban decay. It was perfect. A utopia. But there was something else. A subtle undercurrent that prickled at the back of his neck. the people didn't laugh much. They walked with their heads down, their expressions placid and obedient. When the Doombots passed, they would subtly straighten their posture, their gazes averted. And on every major building, on banners hanging from every lamppost, was the same symbol, a stylized, fearsome iron mask. This wasn't a city of joy. It was a city of flawless, crushing order. This was Doomstadt, capital of Latveria. Behold, Izuka Midoriya, Doom's voice resonated from behind him. The result of a singular vision. A world where need has been abolished, where chaos is a memory. A world saved from itself. Izuka could only stare. It's perfect. It is efficient, Doom corrected. Perfection is a continuous process. This is merely the foundation. Now come. Your new life does not afford you the luxury of being an idle tourist. Doom led him through vast, echoing halls of stone and steel, the clang of his armored boots the only sound. They arrived at a set of colossal iron doors that hissed open to reveal Izuka's new classroom, a chamber that was equal parts library, laboratory, and arcane workshop. One side of the room was lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves groaning under the weight of countless books, scrolls, and data slates. The other side was a state-of-the-art laboratory, filled with equipment that made UA's support course labs look like a child's chemistry set, holographic projectors, quantum computers, fusion reactors the size of a fist. In the center of the room, etched into the floor in glowing runes, was a vast, intricate circle that hummed with a quiet, palpable power. Your education will be twofold, Doom announced, his voice filling the cavernous space. For you to succeed me, you must master the twin pillars upon which reality is built, science and sorcery. They are not opposing forces, as the ignorant believe. They are two dialects of the same cosmic language. Science is the study of the universe's physical laws. Sorcery is the manipulation of its metaphysical laws. To rule, to truly have power, you must be fluent in both. Izuka's training began that very night. It was the most grueling, relentless, and exhilarating experience of his life. There were no grades, no classmates, no summer vacations. There was only the curriculum, and the unyielding expectations of his new master. His mornings were devoted to science. Doom did not teach him. He provided the resources and the objective. His first assignment was simple: absorb. He was given access to Doom's entire library. He started with basic physics and chemistry, but his mind, so long sharpened on the whetstone of hero analysis, devoured the information at a staggering rate. Within weeks, he was consuming advanced quantum mechanics, cybernetics, and materials science. He learned to think not in terms of problems, but in systems. The world was no longer a collection of people and places. It was a complex machine of interlocking variables, and he was learning how to read the schematic. His intellect, once a source of mockery, was now his greatest asset. He filled notebooks not with hero sketches, but with engine schematics, AI coding strings, and theoretical designs for arc reactors. Doom would review his work silently, his only feedback a curt adequate, proceed, or a red-line correction on a flawed equation, often with an annotation that solved the problem in a way so elegant and simple it made Izuka feel like a toddler. His first practical project came after 3 months. Doom placed a simple block of titanium on a workbench. Build a drone, he commanded. It must be capable of silent flight, possess a multi-spectrum sensor suite, and be equipped with a non-lethal sonic incapacitator. You have 1 month. Izuka poured everything he had learned into the project. He spent days designing the chassis, weeks writing the flight control and sensor analysis algorithms. He failed countless times. An early prototype for the anti-gravity drive overloaded and melted half the workbench. A coding error in the AI caused it to identify a chair as a hostile entity and attempt to incapacitate it. But with each failure he learned. He iterated. He analyzed. The process was identical to how he used to deconstruct a hero's quirk, but now, he was constructing something new. At the end of the month, he presented his creation, a sleek, dark green drone, the size of a dinner plate, that hovered with perfect silence. He called it the Observer Mark I. Doom inspected it with a critical eye, his masked face unreadable. He accessed its code, reviewed its sensor logs, and activated its sonic weapon. which emitted a high-frequency pulse that made Izuku's teeth ache. The power cell is inefficient by 4.7%, Doom stated. The chassis has 3 redundant structural supports where 2, properly placed, would suffice. The AI's threat assessment parameters are rudimentary, but it functions. It is a passable first effort. Coming from Doom, this was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Izuku felt a surge of pride so potent it almost made him dizzy. He had created something. With his own mind. His own hands, power that had nothing to do with genetics. His afternoons were spent on the other side of the room, in the realm of sorcery. This was a far greater struggle. Science was logical, governed by rules and equations he could understand. Magic was abstract. It was a force to be commanded by will alone. Mana is the background radiation of existence, Doom explained during their first lesson, standing in the center of the runic circle. It is the energy of creation itself. The unenlightened are deaf to its song, blind to its light. A sorcerer forces it to bend to his will. You have no genetic gift, no quirk, but your will, Izuku Midoriya, your will is a furnace. That is your conduit. Doom instructed him to sit, to clear his mind, and to feel. For weeks, Izuku felt nothing but frustration. He would sit for hours, trying to sense this invisible energy, only to end up with a splitting headache and a profound sense of failure. He saw Doom effortlessly conjure globes of light, weave shields of shimmering force, and summon gusts of wind with a simple flick of his wrist. For Izuku, it felt impossible. You are trying to think your way to power, Doom critiqued one afternoon, watching Izuku strain until beads of sweat ran down his face. Magic is not an equation to be solved. It is an ocean. You do not command it by understanding every drop, but by imposing your will upon the tide. Stop thinking. Want it. The breakthrough came during a meditation session. Frustrated and exhausted, Izuku's mind drifted back to the sludge villain, to the feeling of helpless terror as Kaken choked. He remembered the desperate, all-consuming need to act, the raw, primal urge to save him that had propelled his useless legs forward. He focused on that feeling, not the memory, but the pure, unadulterated will behind it. He wanted to protect. He wanted to shield. He opened his eyes. A faint, pale green shimmer, no larger than his palm, was hovering over his hands. It was weak, flickering, and utterly unstable, but it was there. His first ward. He stared at it, tears welling in his eyes. It was real. This too was real. From that point on, his progress was steady. His iron will, forged in a decade of relentless self-belief against a world that told him he was nothing, was the perfect tool for the arcane arts. He learned to draw runes of power, to chant words that made the very air vibrate, to shape mana into simple constructs of light, force, and elemental energy. It was a different kind of power from science, more intuitive and far more draining, but it felt just as real. One evening, after nearly a year in Latveria, Doom summoned him. Izuku was no longer the scrawny, hunched boy who had arrived. The rigorous physical training that accompanied his studies had given him a lean, wiry strength. His face had lost its roundness, replaced by sharper angles and a constant, focused intensity in his eyes. He wore the simple gray and green tunic of a Latverian apprentice, his posture straight, his demeanor calm. Doom stood before a large, holographic map of Doomstadt. Your drone is complete, he stated. It is a tool. A tool's purpose is defined by its use. Show me you understand. On the map, a single point of light blinked red. There is a structural flaw in the primary support cable of the Novi Trotsky bridge. A microscopic fracture in a single bolt, caused by metal fatigue. In its current state, it is undetectable by standard sensors. In 3 months, under peak traffic load and seasonal temperature stress, it will fail. The resulting collapse will claim an estimated 217 lives. Izuku stared at the map. How do you know this? My own orbital platforms scan the entirety of Latveria's infrastructure at the molecular level, 24 hours a day, Doom replied dismissively, as if explaining basic addition. I know the stress points of every brick and rivet in my kingdom. The question is not how I know. The question is, what do you do? Izuku's mind immediately went to his old way of thinking. A hero would. We have to warn people. Evacuate the bridge, shut it down. Chaos, Doom cut him off. Panic. Economic disruption. An admission of failure in our engineering. The people's faith in the state's infallibility would be shaken, even if only for a day. It is an inefficient, theatrical solution. It is the hero's way. Think, boy. I have given you the tools. What is the ruler's way? Izuku looked from the map to the observer drone sitting on the workbench. His mind started to work, connecting the pieces, seeing the system. He wasn't supposed to react to the disaster. He was supposed to prevent it. Silently. The flaw is in a single bolt, Izuku began, thinking aloud. If I can get a new bolt, forged from a superior alloy to the site, and how do you replace it without shutting down the bridge and causing the very panic we seek to avoid? Doom prompted, his voice a cold scalpel. Izuku's eyes widened as the plan formed, elegant and precise. During the lowest traffic period, between 3 and 4 a.m., I can use the observer drone. Its flight is silent. Its sensors can lock onto the precise vibrational frequency of the flawed bolt. I can equip it with a manipulator arm, a small one. It could unscrew the damaged bolt and replace it with the new one in under a minute. No one would ever know. The disaster would simply never happen. He looked at Doom, his heart pounding with the thrill of the solution. It was cold, impersonal, and utterly effective. Doom remained silent for a long moment. The red light on the holographic map continued its ominous pulse. Then he spoke. A hero saves 217 people from a falling bridge and is celebrated for a day. A king reinforces the foundation, and no one ever knows the danger they were in. His reward is not adulation. It is the silent, continuing, orderly function of his society. He turned to face Izuku fully. You have just saved 217 lives. You did not use your fists. You did not seek gratitude. You used analysis, technology, and foresight. You did not act like a hero. You have, for the first time, acted like a ruler. Doom placed a heavy, gauntlet hand on Izuku's shoulder. The metal was still cold, but for the first time, Izuku didn't feel a chill. He felt the weight of approval. The weight of purpose. Go, Doom commanded. Forge the bolt. Calibrate the drone. Your first lesson is complete. As Izuku turned to the lab, his mind already calculating alloy compositions and manipulator torque ratios, he realized the truth. He hadn't just saved 217 hypothetical lives. He had saved himself. The last, desperate ghost of the hero-worshipping boy on the rooftop had finally faded, replaced by something harder, sharper, and infinitely more capable. He wasn't just learning science and sorcery. He was learning the Latvian doctrine. And he was a very, very good student. A year is a lifetime. For Izuku Midoriya, it was several. The boy who had stumbled through a dimensional rift from a rooftop in Muzurifu was a ghost, a shed skin left behind in another reality. The person who now stood in the center of the Praxium, Castle Doom's cavernous combat chamber, was someone new, forged in a crucible of science and sorcery. The air hummed with the whine of servomotors and the crackle of discharged energy. 3 advanced model Doombots circled him, their movements fluid and predatory. A year ago, the sight would have sent him into a fit of terrified analytical muttering. Now, his mind was a sea of calm, cold calculation. Threat Alpha, Brawler Model. Heavy plating, plasma fists. Predictable rush patterns. Exploit low maneuverability. Threat Beta, Skirmisher Model. Lighter frame, pulse rifle, enhanced agility. Maintain distance, disrupt targeting with arcane interference. Threat Gamma, Infiltrator Model. Sonic dampeners, vibroblades. The true danger. Keep it in my line of sight at all times. His posture was no longer the apologetic hunch of a bullied schoolboy. He stood with his back straight, his feet planted in a solid, balanced fighting stance. The simple gray and green Latvian apprentice fatigues he wore were darkened with sweat, clinging to a physique that was no longer soft and undefined, but corded with the lean, efficient muscle of a dedicated warrior. A thin, silvery scar cut across his left cheekbone, a permanent reminder of a misspoken syllable in an early shielding incantation. Alpha charged, its metal feet thundering against the polished obsidian floor. Izuku didn't retreat. He met the charge, sliding low and to the left, his hand glowing with a soft, green light. He slapped his palm against the bot's charging leg, not with physical force, but with a pulse of pure mana. Ruin of inertia. The bot's leg seized, its momentum sending it tumbling forward in a graceless heap of screeching metal. A high-energy pulse bolt seared the air where his head had been. He was already moving, rolling into a crouch as he focused on Beta. He didn't need a complex spell. He simply extended his fingers and willed the air in front of the bot's rifle to shimmer and distort, creating a heat-hazed lens of pure force. The next shot was refracted, splashing harmlessly against the far wall. A flicker of movement in his periphery. Gamma. The infiltrator decloaked, its vibroblades humming as it lunged for his back. Too slow, Izuku thought. Without looking, he stomped his foot, channeling a stronger pulse of mana into the floor. A shockwave of emerald energy erupted outwards, not powerful enough to damage, but perfectly tuned to disrupt the bot's advanced equilibrium sensors. Gamma staggered, its stealth field flickering erratically. That was the only opening Izuku needed. He spun, his hand now crackling with contained bioelectricity, and drove his palm into the bot's central processing unit. The infiltrator convulsed and dropped, its optic light fading to black. One down. Beta was recalibrating, its rifle struggling to lock on through the arcane interference. Alpha was still trying to get its leg to obey. Izuku didn't give them the chance. He clapped his hands together, the sound echoing like a thunderclap, and spoke a single, sharp word of power. A web of green energy erupted from his hands, enveloping the two remaining bots and freezing them in a lattice of solid mana. Combat exercise concluded, he said, his breathing only slightly labored. Threats neutralized. The chamber lights brightened. From a high observation deck, Dr. Doom descended on a silent, gravimetric platform. He came to a halt before Izuku, his impassive iron mask surveying the scene of controlled chaos. Your tactical efficiency has improved by 12%, Doom stated, his voice the familiar metallic resonance that had become the backdrop of Izuku's new life. Your mana shaping is more refined. However, you expended 8% more energy than was optimal. The rune of inertia was an elegant solution for the brawler, but a simple, well-placed kinetic blast would have achieved the same result with a third of the arcane cost. Efficiency, boy. In a true battle, wasted energy is a self-inflicted wound. I will be more mindful, Master, Izuku replied, his voice steady and respectful. There was no fear in it, only the focus of a student receiving a critical evaluation. Mindfulness is the passive state. Strive for perfection, the active one, Doom corrected. Your progress in both the physical and metaphysical arts is acceptable, but controlling fabricated threats in a sterile environment is merely the foundation. A ruler is not tested by sparring partners. He is tested by crisis, by chaos, by the unpredictable and irrational nature of those who would see his order undone. He gestured, and a section of the chamber floor slid away, revealing a sunken amphitheater containing a single, throne-like chair facing a hemispherical wall of seamless, black metal. It is time for your first true examination. Enter the cognition crucible. Izuku's heart gave a slight, nervous flutter. He had read about the crucible. It was Doom's most advanced simulation device, a nexus of psionic technology, hard light projection, and quantum computing that could create scenarios indistinguishable from reality, down to the last sensory detail. It was a place where one could live or die 1,000 times without ever suffering a scratch. A place where failure was a lesson, not a sentence. He took his seat in the chair. A sleek black helmet descended, sealing him in darkness and silence. He took a deep, centering breath, calming his mind as Doom had taught him. A moment later, a soft chime echoed in his ears, and the world was born anew. He was standing on a rooftop, the smell of rain-soaked asphalt and city smog filling his lungs. He looked down at his hands. They were clad in dark green, armored gloves. A quick self-assessment revealed he was wearing a light, prototype combat suit he had been designing, a precursor to a full suit of armor, equipped with a basic kinetic shield generator on one gauntlet and repulsor flight boots. Simulation parameters active. A calm, synthetic voice echoed in his mind. Scenario: the Mercy General Hospital siege. A holographic display shimmered into existence before him, showing a tactical map of a large hospital complex. Red icons pulsed within. A terrorist cell, calling themselves the Ashbourne Disciples, has seized control of the hospital. They are armed, fanatical, and led by a charismatic nihilist known only as Decay. Their motives are unclear, but appear to be centered around causing maximum chaos. There are an estimated 87 civilian hostages, 45 patients, 42 staff. The local authorities are in disarray. Your objective, resolve the situation. The voice faded. Izuku zoomed in on the tactical display, his mind immediately sifting through the data. He saw heat signatures, building schematics, potential entry points. But then, another window opened. It was a live security feed from inside the pediatric ward. A group of terrified doctors and nurses were huddled around a dozen small children, trying to keep them quiet. One of the terrorists, a woman with a manic grin and a fondness for knives, danced around them like a predator toying with her food. In the corner, a little girl with pink hair was sobbing, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Something in Izuku's chest clenched. It was a familiar, painful ache. A ghost. Resolve the situation, the simulation had said. The word was cold, clinical. But looking at the face of that crying child, Izuku felt the old instincts flare to life. The instincts of a hero. Save them all. Doom's lessons on impersonal, strategic command vanished like smoke. This wasn't a tactical problem. It was a moral imperative. He couldn't just sit back and manage variables from a distance. All Might wouldn't have. He would have gone in himself, a symbol of hope crashing through the doors to tell them, I am here, Izuku whispered to himself, the words feeling strange on his tongue. His decision was made. He would be the hero. He launched himself from the rooftop, his repulsor boots kicking in with a soft hum. He landed silently on a lower balcony outside the surgical wing, a blind spot in the terrorists' patrols. He found an access panel, and with a focused jolt of electricity from his fingertip, shorted the lock. He slipped inside. The hospital was eerily quiet, the silence punctuated by a distant, angry shout. He moved with a practiced stealth that was a blend of physical discipline and minor light-bending spells to blur his form. His first encounter was with two grunts guarding a hallway. He took them down with swift, non-lethal efficiency, a repulsor blast to disarm one, a nerve pinch to the neck of the other. He felt a rush, a heady surge of adrenaline and righteousness. This was it. This was the feeling he had chased his entire life. He made his way towards the pediatric ward, his primary objective. He could hear the manic woman's voice, Flicker, as the dossier had named her. He prepared for a direct assault, planning to breach the door, shield the hostages, and incapacitate her in one fluid motion. But as his hand reached for the door, a man's voice, rasping and unhinged, crackled through the hospital's PA system. It was Decay. To the pathetic heroes I know are listening, you think this is a negotiation? This is a sermon. Society is a disease. And I am the cure. A loud, crashing sound followed, and the PA system went dead. Simultaneously, a new alert flashed on Izuku's HUD. Warning, explosive device detected. Location morgue sub-level 2. Detonation in 10 minutes. Izuku froze. A bomb. Of course. It was a classic gambit. And then, a scream from the ward behind him. He spun around just as a gout of orange flame erupted from under the door. Another alert screamed on his display. Warning, accelerant-based fire detected. Pediatric ward. It was a trap. A perfectly executed pincer movement of crises. They knew someone was inside. They had used him, his heroic charge, to trigger their plan. The ghost of heroism was screaming at him. Save the children from the fire. No, stop the bomb, it will kill everyone. No, take out the terrorists before they hurt anyone else. He was one person. He couldn't be in three places at once. Panic, that old, hated enemy, began to seep in. He made a choice. The children were the most immediate danger. He blasted the door open. The room was an inferno. Flicker was gone, having slipped out a back exit. The sprinkler system had been disabled. He threw up a shimmering green shield, a ward of force to hold back the flames, while trying to herd the terrified, choking staff and children towards the exit. But the shield required concentration, mana. He was stretched thin. Bomb detonation in 5 minutes. He had to leave. He had to get to the bomb. He guided the last child out, his lungs burning, his suit's integrity alarms blaring from the heat. He abandoned the pediatric ward to the fire and sprinted through the hospital, a desperate, frantic race against time. He reached the sublevel just as another alert lit up. Flicker had reappeared in the ICU, and was systematically destroying life support equipment. Another crisis. Another impossible choice. He ignored it, focusing on the bomb. He found it strapped to a generator in the morgue. A complex device with a mess of wires and a glowing timer. He was no demolitions expert. Doom's education had been broad, but this was a specialized field he hadn't reached yet. He analyzed it, his mind racing, trying to apply theoretical principles to a very real, very deadly problem. Bomb detonation in 30 seconds. He found what he thought was the trigger mechanism. He tried to disable it with a localized EMP from his gauntlet. The timer sped up. 10, 9, 8. He had failed. In his desperate attempt to be the hero, to be the one on the front lines, he had played right into their hands. He had become a pawn in their game of chaos. 3, 2, 1. The world went white. Then darkness. Simulation terminated. The synthetic voice announced, utterly devoid of judgment. Primary objective failed. Hostage casualties 87. Asset casualties 1 user. Infrastructure damage catastrophic. The helmet retracted, and Izuku found himself back in the crucible, the silence of the chamber a crushing weight. He was slumped in the chair, his body trembling, his skin slick with a cold sweat that was all too real. He had felt the heat, smelled the smoke, heard the screams. And he had failed them all. The old, familiar feeling of uselessness washed over him, a venom he thought he had purged from his system. He was still just Deku. Heavy, metallic footsteps approached. Doom stood before him, his masked gaze seeming to pierce right through Izuku's soul. You were brilliant, Doom said, his voice a low rumble. And you were a fool. Izuku flinched, bracing for a tirade, for punishment. But Doom's tone wasn't angry. It was dissecting. Your micro-level tactics were superb. Your infiltration, your takedowns, your shield work, all executed with precision. But your grand strategy was non-existent. You reacted to the enemy, allowing them to dictate the flow of battle. You charged in like the blonde oaf you once idolized, believing your mere presence was a solution. You saw a crying child and allowed your sentimentality to override your logic. Your compassion became a resource for the enemy to exploit. You entered the equation as a chaotic variable. A ruler does not become a variable, Izuku. He controls the equation. Every word was a perfectly placed blow, dismantling not his actions, but the very philosophy behind them. The ghost of heroism, the thing he had clung to, was what had killed them all. Izuku clenched his fists, shame and anger warring within him. He was angry at decay, at the simulation, at Doom. But most of all, he was furious with himself, with the weak, sentimental part of him that had cost everyone their lives. The desire to save them was not the flaw, Doom continued, as if reading his thoughts. The flaw was in your method. You tried to be their shield. A ruler must be their surgeon. He does not stand between the patient and the disease. He methodically, dispassionately, cuts the disease out. Izuku looked up, his eyes burning with a new fire. Not shame. Not despair. But a cold, hard resolve. Reset the simulation, he said, his voice low and tight. Doom tilted his head slightly. You are certain? Reset it. Doom gave a single, sharp nod. The helmet descended once more, plunging Izuku back into darkness. When the world reformed, he was on the same rooftop, the same mission parameters flashing in his vision. The same live feed of the pediatric ward appeared. He saw the crying girl with the stuffed rabbit. This time, he felt nothing. He closed the video feed. He did not move from the rooftop. Instead, he knelt, placing his palm flat on the concrete. He closed his eyes and expanded his senses, not his physical ones, but his arcane awareness. He pushed his mana into the very foundations of the building, feeling it spread like a web. He felt the vibrations of footsteps, the thrum of the hospital's electrical systems, the cold stillness in the morgue. He was no longer a soldier on the ground. He was the eye in the sky. He was the ghost in the machine. Next, he deployed his own ghosts. From his suit's utility pouch, he released 3 microdrones, miniaturized versions of his Observer Mark I. They were silent, no larger than a dragonfly, and phased to be nearly invisible to standard electronics. They slipped through ventilation shafts, mapping the entire building, tagging every hostile, every civilian, monitoring their life signs, painting a complete tactical picture on his HUD. He had absolute information dominance. He saw the bomb in the morgue. He saw flicker in the pediatric ward. He saw a pyrokinetic, Cinder, waiting with an incendiary device near the ventilation controls. He saw decay in the central security office, surrounded by hostages. He saw their entire strategy laid bare, and he refused to play their game. He did not enter the hospital. He became the architect of its salvation from afar. Phase 1 Isolation, he thought, his fingers flying across a holographic interface projected from his gauntlet. He found the hospital's internal communication system and hacked it with practiced ease. He severed their connection to the outside world. No more taunts over the PA system. No more demands. Only silence. Phase 2 Control. He accessed the hospital's automated systems. He locked down every blast door, every elevator, every electronic lock, isolating the terrorist cells from each other. They were no longer a cohesive unit. They were rats in a maze of his own design. Phase 3 Surgical Neutralization. A compartment on his back hissed open, releasing a dozen small, spider-like Doombots. They were not designed for heavy combat, but for precision strikes. He divided them into 3 teams. Team Alpha descended to the sub-level. They did not try to disarm the bomb. Instead, they surrounded it, attaching a device of Izuku's own design to the generator it was wired to. With a single command, the device activated, encasing the bomb in a localized stasis field, a bubble of frozen time created by a complex arcane matrix. The timer stopped, the threat neutralized without a single wire being cut. Team Beta crawled through the vents towards the pediatric ward and Cinder's position. They did not engage directly. They released a colorless, odorless aerosol, a potent but non-lethal neuroparalytic gas. Cinder and Flicker collapsed without ever knowing they were under attack. Team Gamma, the largest group, advanced on the security office. But they did not storm the door. 2 bots created a loud, explosive breach on the far side of the hallway, a classic diversion. As Decay and his grunts turned to face the perceived threat, the rest of Team Gamma silently cut through the wall behind them and injected them all with the same paralytic agent. The entire operation took 93 seconds. It was silent, bloodless, and brutally efficient. The simulation's voice echoed in his mind. Primary objective achieved. Hostage casualties 0. Terrorist casualties 0, all captured. Infrastructure damage minimal. Flawless victory. The helmet retracted. Izuku stood up from the chair. He felt no elation. No adrenaline. No heroic pride. He felt a profound and unsettling emptiness. He had saved them all, but he had done so from a distance, treating them as abstract figures on a map. He had not looked into their eyes, had not offered them a comforting word, had not received a single, grateful glance. He had saved 87 lives, and he felt utterly, completely alone. Doom was waiting for him, his masked face unreadable as always. You achieved a perfect outcome, Doom observed. Yet you are not satisfied. Why? Izuku looked at his own hands, one armored in dark metal, the other bare and tingling with the residue of the stasis spell. I didn't save them. I just solved the problem. Precisely, Doom said, and for the first time, Izuku detected something that might have been approval in his metallic voice. You are dissatisfied because you did not receive their adulation, their gratitude. You were denied the emotional reward of heroism. You acted as a surgeon, removing a cancer with cold precision. The patient is saved, but they do not thank the scalpel. They often fear it. The words struck Izuku with the force of a physical blow, shattering the last stained glass window of his old dream. He finally understood. The drive to be a hero wasn't just about saving people. It was about the smile, the connection, the validation. It was about being seen, being loved, being the symbol. It was, in its own way, a deeply selfish desire. True, absolute salvation, the kind Doom spoke of, required the sacrifice of that desire. It required a leader to work from the shadows, to make the hard, impersonal choices, to be the unthanked, unseen architect of a better world. It required the death of the ego. Izuku looked at his reflection in the polished obsidian floor. He saw a young man with haunted eyes, standing in the shadow of an iron monarch. The ghost of the hero he wanted to be was finally gone. It hadn't been exorcised by Doom. It had been banished by Izuku himself, in a cold, silent, and flawless victory. He did not mourn its passing. He simply acknowledged the empty space it left behind, and the cold, hard purpose that was already beginning to fill it. The victory in the cognition crucible was a turning point, a final, silent eulogy for the ghost of the boy who had dreamed of being a hero. In the months that followed, Izuku's training intensified, the lessons shifting from the theoretical to the profoundly practical. He was no longer just a student, he was an apprentice, an heir being groomed not just to understand power, but to wield it. He spent weeks in Latveria's orbital command center, learning to manage the nation's automated defense grid, its global intelligence network, and its atmospheric stabilizers. He sat in on Doom's council meetings, a silent observer at the foot of the throne, absorbing the cold calculus of statecraft as his master managed Latveria's resources, dictated foreign policy, and passed judgment with unwavering, logical severity. He learned that ruling was not about grand pronouncements, but about the relentless, grinding management of 1,000 interconnected systems. His mastery of the arcane arts deepened. He could now weave complex wards, scry through pools of enchanted water to view distant lands, and command the elements with a word and a gesture. Yet, for every step he took, Doom was 1,000 steps ahead, a constant, humbling reminder of the vast gulf that still separated them. One morning, Doom summoned him not to the library or the combat chamber, but to a place deep in the heart of the castle, the Royal Forge. It was a place of mythic grandeur, a cathedral dedicated to the art of creation. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, hot metal, and something else, a faint, sharp tang of raw magic. Automated, multi-jointed robotic arms hung from the ceiling, their tips glowing with plasma-cutting heat or crackling with mystic energy. In the center of the vast, circular chamber was a single, anvil-like platform of polished obsidian, inscribed with a dizzying array of glowing runes. "You have absorbed my lessons," Doom's voice echoed from the forge's high, vaulted ceiling. "You have proven your intellect and your will. But a ruler needs more than knowledge. He needs a symbol. A tool, a physical extension of his will that tells the world who and what he is. Your prototype combat suit is a child's toy. The time has come for you to forge your armor." Izuku's heart hammered in his chest. An armor. Like Doom's. It was the next, definitive step in his transformation. It was a coronation of sorts. "An armor is not merely a defensive shell," Doom continued, descending on his gravimetric platform to stand before the obsidian anvil. "It is a self-contained ecosystem. A life support system. A weapon of unimaginable power. A mobile command center. It is your fortress, your laboratory, and your scepter. My own armor allows me to survive the crushing pressures of the deepest ocean and the void of space. It grants me strength to rival the strongest of these so-called heroes and houses the technology to rewrite the laws of physics. It is the synthesis of all my knowledge, all my power. It is Doom." He turned his impassive mask towards Izuku. "You will not replicate my armor. To do so would be an admission of a lack of imagination. Your armor must be a reflection of you. Your tactical philosophy, your unique synthesis of the arts I have taught you. It will be your aegis. Your shield against the chaotic world." The task was monumental, the single most complex undertaking of Izuku's life. It was to be his final exam and his masterpiece, all in one. "You will be given access to all the resources of the Royal Forge," Doom declared. "The rarest alloys from the deepest mines. The most powerful energy crystals, the arcane catalysts gathered from dimensional rifts. But the design, the intellect, the will that binds them together, that must be yours alone." For the next 4 months, the forge became Izuku's world. He slept on a cot in a corner, ate nutrient paste delivered by a silent servitor bot, and lived and breathed the singular, all-consuming project of creating his aegis. He began, as he always did, with analysis. He spent the first month in deep study and design. He didn't want to create an imitation of Doom's armor. Doom's armor was regal, intimidating, a symbol of absolute monarchy. It was designed to inspire fear and awe. It was the armor of a king on his throne. Izuku envisioned something different. He wasn't a king yet. He was an operator. A scalpel. His philosophy, honed in the crucible, was one of silent, overwhelming efficiency. His armor should reflect that. He sketched hundreds of designs and holographic displays, starting with the aesthetics. He abandoned the idea of a flowing cape like Doom's. It was impractical, a potential liability in close quarters. He settled on a form that was sleek, ergonomic, and built for speed and stealth. He chose a color palette that was a nod to his past, but twisted into something new, a deep, metallic forest green, almost black in low light, with accents of polished silver and matte black. It was reminiscent of his old, childish hero costume concept, but stripped of all its cheerful naivety. It was the color of a predator, not a savior. The helmet was the most difficult part. Doom's mask was a symbol of fear and power, hiding the man to present the monarch. Izuku wanted his helmet to be functional above all else. He designed a full-face helm that was less ornate, with a T-shaped visor of one-way, polarized crystal that glowed with a soft, green light. It was equipped with a full-spectrum sensor suite, a direct neural interface, and tactical display overlays that would feed him a constant stream of data. It wasn't a mask to hide his identity. It was a lens through which he would view and analyze the world. With the design finalized, he moved to the technology, the armor's beating heart. At its core would be a miniature arc reactor of his own design, a refined and stabilized version that was more efficient and ran cooler than any publicly known model on Earth. This would power everything. The flight system was a priority. He eschewed bulky jets in favor of a hybrid system, gravimetric repulsors in the boots for high-speed flight and maneuverability, and a subtle, mana-fueled enchantment woven into the armor's substructure that would allow for perfectly silent hovering and fine-tuned movement. He would move not with the roar of a rocket, but with the silence of a ghost. The weapon systems were calibrated for non-lethal force, a direct reflection of his victory in the simulation. The primary weapons were variable output repulsor gauntlets, capable of delivering anything from a gentle kinetic push to a concussive blast that could shatter concrete. He also integrated sonic emitters for disorienting crowds and a high-yield EMP for disabling electronics. Lethal force was an option, a thin, superheated plasma blade that could extend from his right gauntlet, but it was a final, dispassionate resort, not a primary tool. The most ambitious component was the onboard AI. He spent weeks writing the base code for a quantum-level artificial intelligence that would serve as his co-pilot, tactical advisor, and systems manager. It would monitor his vitals, regulate power flow, assist in hacking, and provide real-time strategic analysis during combat. He needed a designation for it. He remembered Doom's words. Your Aegis, your shield. He named the AI Aegis. Aegis, run a diagnostic on the primary power conduits, he would murmur to the empty forge, and a synthesized female voice, calm and professional, would respond from the workshop speakers. Diagnostics complete. All conduits operating at 99.8% efficiency. Minor energy fluctuations detected in Relay 7 Gamma. Recommend recalibration. The final layer, and the one that truly set his armor apart, was the arcane. While Doom's armor was a masterpiece of science with mystical elements integrated, Izuku designed his Aegis from the ground up as a true synthesis of the two. He didn't just add enchantments. He wove magic into the very molecular structure of the armor. He spent weeks meticulously etching runes onto the inner surfaces of each armor plate before they were bonded. Runes of durability that would distribute kinetic impact across the entire suit. Runes of elemental resistance that would dissipate heat, cold, and electricity. Runes of silence that would bend sound waves around him. Most importantly, he inscribed the entire inner chassis with a complex network of mana-conducting channels. The armor would not just be a protective shell, it would be a massive arcane focus, drawing on the reactor's energy to amplify his own innate magical abilities 100-fold. Casting a shield would no longer require a significant portion of his own stamina. He could simply draw power from the suit, making his magical potential nearly limitless. The day of the final forging was a ritual in itself. Izuku stood before the obsidian anvil, the unbonded plates of his armor laid out in the shape of a man. The great robotic arms of the forge hummed to life, awaiting his commands. Doom watched from the observation deck, a silent, motionless sentinel. Izuku began. Initiate Phase 1, Molecular Bonding, he commanded. Plasma torches hotter than the surface of the sun descended, their fire washing over the custom-forged vibranium adamantium alloy plates. The metal glowed white-hot, but did not melt. This was the science. Initiate Phase 2, Arcane Infusion. He raised his hands, his eyes glowing with a faint green light. He began to chant in an ancient, guttural language that made the very air in the forge tremble. The runes etched on the inside of the armor plates flared to life, their emerald light pulsing in time with his words. He poured his will, his mana, his very essence into the metal, binding the enchantments to the alloy on a quantum level. This was the sorcery. The two forces, technology and magic, met in a blinding flash of light that forced Izuku to shield his eyes. A wave of pure power washed over the forge, a perfect, harmonious synthesis. When the light faded, the armor was whole. It lay on the anvil, not as separate pieces, but as a single, unified form, the deep green metal seeming to drink the light from the room. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was his. Aegis, Izuku said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and awe. Initiate startup sequence. The T-shaped visor on the helmet flickered to life, its soft green glow reflecting in Izuku's wide eyes. The suit levitated off the anvil, its joints moving with an eerie, silent grace as it reconfigured itself into a standing position. All systems online, the AI's voice spoke, this time directly into Izuku's mind through their neural link. Arc reactor stable. Mana conduits charged. Neural interface synchronized. The Aegis is ready, Creator. Doom descended, his own armored form a stark, silvery contrast to Izuku's dark green creation. He circled the Aegis, his gaze analytical, missing no detail. He ran a gauntlet finger along a seam, tested the articulation of a joint, and held his hand near the chest plate, likely sensing the flow of energy within. A remarkable fusion of disciplines, Doom said after a long, silent inspection. Sleek, efficient, and lethal in its subtlety. It is not the armor of a king, but of a king's most trusted hand, the hand that moves silently in the shadows to enforce the king's will. It is sufficient. Coming from Doom, the word was the highest possible praise. An instrument is meaningless without a purpose, Doom continued, turning his gaze back to Izuku. Your final test is not one of creation, but of application. A field test. A holographic map of Latveria appeared between them. A remote, mountainous region near the northern border glowed red. Our long-range sensors and intelligence assets have detected a parasitic anomaly. A splinter cell of the organization known as Hydra has established a foothold within our borders. They believe themselves hidden in the ruins of an old mining outpost. They are fools. Izuku's eyes narrowed. Hydra. Even in this world, their cancer had spread. He had read Doom's extensive files on them. Fanatics. Subversives. An agent of chaos. An infection. They have brought with them advanced weaponry and a primitive understanding of this world's superpowered genetics, Doom explained. They are attempting to create their own army of super soldiers, an affront to true power and a direct threat to Latverian sovereignty. The Latverian army could crush them in an hour, but it would be a messy, loud affair. This is a task for a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. The objective was clear. This was not a simulation. This was real. Real lives. Real consequences. You will go alone, Doom commanded. You will infiltrate their base. You will neutralize their operation, destroy their research, and capture every last one of them for interrogation and re-education. You will do this with 0 fatalities. Latveria does not grant its enemies the honor of a noble death in battle. We dismantle them. Utterly. Izuku nodded, his expression grim. He understood. This wasn't about heroism. It was about pest control. He walked towards the Aegis armor. It stood impassively, a silent testament to his new self. With a mental command, the chest plate hissed open, the suit unfolding to accept him. He stepped inside. The armor closed around him with a series of soft, satisfying clicks, the inner lining molding perfectly to his form. For a moment, there was darkness. Then, the world exploded in a symphony of data. The neural interface came online, and the suit became an extension of his body. He could feel the gravimetric repulses in his boots, the charge in his gauntlets, the hum of the arc reactor in his chest. The tactical display flared to life in his vision, showing his vitals, the suit's energy levels, and a direct link to Latveria's satellite network. "Welcome, Izuku," Aegis's voice resonated in his mind, no longer an external sound but a thought alongside his own. "We are one." He lifted his hand, the metal gauntlet moving with the same speed and grace as his own flesh. He clenched his fist. The power he felt was staggering, a perfect union of his mind, his magic, and the pinnacle of technology. He turned to face his master. Through his new visor, he saw Doom not just as a man in armor, but as a complex energy signature, a web of technological and mystical power. "I will not fail," Izuku stated, his voice now filtered through the armor's vocalizer, deeper and with a faint metallic edge. It was the voice of the Aegis. Doom simply nodded. "See that you do not." Without another word, Izuku turned and walked towards the forge's massive hangar doors, his armored footsteps making a soft, almost inaudible hum. He did not need a dramatic exit. He engaged the silent flight system and rose into the air, a dark green specter against the fires of the forge. He flew out into the cold Latverian night, a living weapon, a symbol of a new kind of power, ready to excise the cancer that had taken root in his master's kingdom. He was no longer Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless boy. He was the Aegis of Doom. And his first hunt had just begun. The silence of the Latverian mountains was a profound and absolute thing. It was broken only by the whisper of the wind over jagged peaks and the soft, almost imperceptible hum of a dark green figure hovering motionlessly in the twilight. Below, in the hollow of a valley, the ruins of the old Hydra mining outpost were a smoldering scar on the landscape. The fires were out, the last of the enemy combatants secured in stasis pods awaiting transport, their research data wiped and the physical hardware melted into slag. Inside the Aegis armor, Izuku Midoriya was a nexus of calm control. His work was done. He had moved with the ruthless efficiency of a phantom, a surgical strike of technology and magic that had dismantled a terrorist cell of 37 armed fanatics in under 20 minutes. He had faced down their desperate attempts at resistance, men crudely augmented with unstable super-soldier serums, and neutralized them with contemptuous ease. A repulsor blast to shatter a knee, a stasis rune to freeze a charging brute, a wave of psionic feedback to overload the senses of their commander. He had followed Doom's directive to the letter: 0 fatalities. 0 escapes. 0 glory. All hostiles secured. Aegis's calm voice resonated in his mind. External structural integrity of the primary facility is at 4%. Objective complete. Awaiting extraction. Acknowledged, Izuku thought back, his own mental voice seamlessly integrated with the AI's. He ran a final, sweeping scan of the valley, his sensors picking up nothing but the fading heat signatures of his own work and the life signs of the native fauna. It was a clean operation. Perfect. He felt a cool, distant satisfaction, the same feeling a master craftsman might have upon finishing a complex piece of clockwork. The moral dimension of it, the fact that he had just single-handedly crushed a budding army, barely registered. It was simply a task, completed to specification. His extraction was as silent and efficient as his infiltration. A cloaked Latverian transport descended from the clouds, its ramp lowering to accept him and his cargo of frozen soldiers. The flight back to Castle Doomstadt was short and silent. He disembarked, oversaw the transfer of the prisoners to the re-education cells in the castle's dungeons, and delivered his after-action report to Doom via a secure comlink. The response from his master was characteristically brief. Acceptable. You have demonstrated a fundamental grasp of asymmetrical warfare. Proceed to your personal workshop. A new directive will follow. Izuku's workshop was a space granted to him after he had completed the Aegis, a testament to his elevated status from student to heir apparent. It was a vast, two-story chamber carved from the mountain rock beneath the castle, a smaller but no less advanced version of the royal forge. Here, surrounded by holographic design tables, fabrication units, and arcane focusing crystals, Izuku continued his work, constantly refining the Aegis armor, designing new microdrones, and exploring the volatile intersection of magic and quantum physics. It was his sanctuary of logic, a place where the chaotic variables of the outside world were held at bay. He was in the middle of calibrating a new, more efficient energy matrix for the Aegis when Doom's presence announced itself not with an entrance, but with a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. The lights dimmed slightly, and a life-size hologram of the monarch flickered into existence before him. You have proven your ability to analyze and neutralize a threat native to this world's primitive power structures, Doom's voice intoned, the holographic projection so perfect Izuku could see the faint scratches on the iron mask. But your understanding of the land of your birth remains theoretical. Based on outdated memories and flawed observations, Izuku stood from his workbench, his posture immediately straightening into one of formal attention. Master? An asset is only as valuable as its understanding of the field upon which it is to be deployed, Doom stated. Your eventual return to Japan is an inevitability. It is the primary nexus of the hero phenomenon, a festering wound of chaotic individualism that must eventually be cauterized. To do so, you must have current, comprehensive intelligence on its key players. Doom made a gesture with his holographic hand, and a new window opened in Izuku's main console. It was a secure, encrypted link to a live satellite feed. The broadcast was from Japan. I have taken the liberty of granting you access to a real-time feed of the UA High School Sports Festival, Doom explained. Consider it a strategic intelligence exercise. Observe these fledgling heroes. Analyze their capabilities, their methodologies, their weaknesses. Strip away the theatricality, and see the mechanics beneath. Your primary education is over, Izuku. This is the beginning of your practical application. Know your enemy. Know their champions. The hologram faded, leaving Izuku alone in the sudden silence. The UA Sports Festival. The name was a ghost from another life. He remembered watching it every year, his face pressed close to the television, his notebooks open, frantically scribbling notes, his heart filled with a desperate, burning envy. It was the grand stage where his dreams had always played out in his head. Now, it was just an assignment. With a strange sense of detachment, he expanded the feed, projecting it onto the massive, wall-size holographic screen he used for schematics. The image resolved with perfect clarity, the sound echoing through his workshop. The roar of a colossal crowd, the vibrant colors of the stadium, the ridiculously loud commentary of the hero-present mic. It was a sensory assault, a pageant of joyous, chaotic energy that felt utterly alien in the cold, sterile silence of his Latvian forge. He sat in his high-backed chair, a cup of nutrient paste, his version of a snack, in his hand. The opening ceremonies were a blur of pageantry he dismissed as irrelevant. He watched Bakugo's arrogant, inflammatory opening pledge with a clinical eye. Psychological profile, textbook narcissism with an extreme aggression response. Easily provoked, a blunt instrument, effective only against those who can be intimidated. He felt no anger, no echo of his past fear. It was like watching a rare but predictable predator perform a dominance display. The first event, the obstacle race, was more interesting. He watched as his former classmates used their quirks in creative, if often inefficient, ways. He saw Todoroki's overwhelming power, creating a glacier in an instant. Impressive raw output, he murmured, making a mental note. But a gross expenditure of energy. Theatrical and lacking in subtlety, leaves him vulnerable to subterranean or phased attacks. He watched Bakugo use his explosions for flight, his movements explosive and erratic. High speed, but lacking in fine control. Trajectory is predictable in the moments between detonations, vulnerable to predictive targeting algorithms or area of effect restraints. He watched Uraraka float herself across a chasm, Ida use his engine-powered speed. He analyzed them all, his mind a silent, humming engine of deconstruction. He was no longer a fan. He was a predator, watching the herd, identifying the weak, the strong, the foolish, the clever. When the cavalry battle began, he leaned forward slightly, his interest peaked. This was a test of teamwork, a variable he had less data on. He watched the team-ups, the alliances, the betrayals. He saw his own non-existent team from that day, the one he had dreamed of leading, being led instead by Todoroki. He felt a flicker of something. A phantom limb tingling with a forgotten sensation. He suppressed it. Sentiment was a flaw in the data. His true focus began with the one-on-one tournament bracket. This was the core of the exercise, individual combat potential, stripped bare. The first match of note he focused on was Hitoshi Shinso versus. He paused. The name on the screen was his own, Izuku Midoriya. For a half-second, the world tilted. He saw himself on that stage, a boy with borrowed power and a terrified heart. He blinked, and the image was gone, replaced by the feed of the real match, the one where that world's Izuku had won. But he ignored the outcome. He focused on the opponent, Shinso. Quirk, brainwashing. Present mixed commentary called it villainous. The crowd was uneasy. Izuku saw it differently. Vocalization activated psionic control. His thoughts flowed, cool and precise. Limited to one target at a time who responds verbally. Incredibly potent for infiltration, interrogation, and pacification of key targets. Its weakness is its activation method. He ran a quick simulation in his mind. If he were to face Shinso, he wouldn't engage in banter. His helmet's audio filters would be programmed to block Shinso's specific voice frequency. If direct confrontation was necessary, a targeted sonic pulse would rupture the boy's vocal cords. A more elegant solution would be a low-level telepathic suggestion, planting a subconscious command to remain silent. The threat was neutralized in 3 different ways in under 5 seconds. Shinso wasn't a villain. He was a useful, if limited, asset. He fast-forwarded through some of the less interesting matches until he reached one that drew a reaction from the crowd, Ochiko Uraraka vs. Katsuki Bakugo. He watched as the girl he once considered his closest friend threw herself at an impossible wall. The crowd began to boo Bakugo, accusing him of toying with her. The pro-heroes in the commentary box defended him, praising Uraraka's unrelenting spirit. Izuku saw neither a bully nor a martyr. He saw a strategic failure. Her willpower is a formidable asset, he noted, a flicker of genuine respect in his analysis. But it was the respect a scientist has for a particularly robust specimen, not the warmth of a friend. But her application of it is fundamentally flawed. She is employing a brute force attrition strategy against a superior opponent. A guaranteed loss. He watched her relentless, desperate charges, each one blasted back by Bakugo's explosions. He saw her plan when she revealed the storm of rubble floating above the ring. It was clever, born of desperation, a good idea. But the execution was clumsy. A single, massive, telegraphed attack, he critiqued silently, his fingers tapping on his armrest. Bakugo has ample time to see it, analyze it, and counter it with a single, overwhelming detonation. Inefficient. His mind, unbidden, formulated a superior strategy. She should not have aimed for one large attack. She should have used her quirk on smaller, faster projectiles. Gravel. Shards of concrete. Create a constant, multi-vector field of debris. Force him to divide his attention, to use smaller, more frequent explosions, draining his stamina and creating openings. Supplement this with feints, forcing him to waste his most powerful attacks on illusions. Use her own zero-gravity to alter her trajectory unpredictably. She fought like a brawler. She should have fought like an assassin. When Bakugo unleashed the massive explosion that ended the match and left Uraraka unconscious, Izuku felt nothing. No anger on her behalf. No satisfaction at Bakugo's victory. He simply catalogued the data. Uraraka, high potential, poor tactical acumen. Bakugo, overwhelming power, confirmed psychological instability. The camera panned to All Might in the stands, his face a grim mask of concern. Izuku's gaze lingered on the symbol of peace. For the first time, a genuine emotion surfaced. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't anger. It was a cold, clean, and deeply satisfying sense of vindication. You told me I couldn't, he thought, his eyes fixed on the hero's image. You saw only what was, and not what could be. You, the most powerful man in the world, We're blinded by the most common prejudice. You were wrong. The thought wasn't triumphant. It wasn't a shout. It was a simple, quiet statement of fact, as clear and undeniable as one of Doom's physical laws. He analyzed the hero, too, the way he held himself, the slight tension in his smile, the way his eyes darted around. He is diminished. Worried. He is no longer an indomitable symbol. He is a teacher, attempting to impart a legacy he himself likely does not fully understand on a conceptual level. He teaches through inspiration, not methodology. A flawed pedagogy. He turned his attention back to the tournament. The final match, Bakugo versus Todoroki. He watched Todoroki's overwhelming, almost casual use of his ice, and his stubborn, self-sabotaging refusal to use his fire. Another one. Izuku thought with a hint of disdain. Another powerful asset crippled by sentiment. Emotional trauma manifesting as a critical strategic vulnerability. In a real conflict, an enemy would exploit this without hesitation. They would threaten his family, or create a situation where only his fire could succeed, forcing him to break his own spirit or accept defeat. He wears his weakness like a banner. The final moments of the fight were, to Izuku, pathetic. Todoroki's half-hearted attack, Bakugo's victory, and then Bakugo's subsequent, furious rage at being denied what he considered a real win. He watched as they chained his former bully to a block of concrete, foaming at the mouth like a rabid animal as he received his gold medal. Izuku didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He simply watched the raw, uncontrolled, chaotic emotion on display and found it distasteful. It was the antithesis of everything he had learned. Power without control was just noise. A tantrum with a larger destructive radius. He had once been terrified of that power. Now, he saw it for what it was, a flaw. A bug in the system that could be easily exploited and neutralized. He had already designed a dozen different ways to defeat Bakugo in his mind. An EMP burst to fry the electronics in his gauntlets. A localized cryomist to inhibit his ability to sweat, rendering his quirk useless. A psionic probe to amplify his rage until it consumed his ability to think strategically. Bakugo wasn't a rival. He was a problem with a clear and simple set of solutions. The awards ceremony concluded. The festival was ending. The broadcast shifted from the main stage to wide shots of the stadium, of the crowds leaving, of the students milling about on the field. And that's when it happened. The camera zoomed in on a small group. Uraraka, looking bruised but determined, was talking with Ida, who was gesturing with his usual sharp, robotic motions. Tsuyu Ajiri was with them, a finger to her chin in her characteristic pose. They were talking about the fight, about their futures. Then, Uraraka laughed at something Ida said. It was a bright, genuine sound. Ida cracked a rare smile. They were comforting each other, supporting each other. They were friends. Another camera angle showed Kirishima trying to calm Bakugo down, his own expression one of friendly concern, not fear. Kaminari and Siro were nearby, laughing and joking, clapping each other on the back. Izuku's analysis engine, the cold, logical processor in his mind that had been running for hours, sputtered and fell silent. He was watching. Camaraderie. Teamwork. Friendship. These were things he had read about, things he had once craved with a desperate, aching loneliness. He tried to analyze it now, to break it down. Social bonding rituals to improve unit cohesion? Emotional support to maintain psychological equilibrium? The words were hollow. They failed to capture the simple, profound reality of what he was seeing. He saw a shared joy, shared disappointment, the unspoken promise of mutual support. He saw a life he was supposed to have had. A life of struggling together, of growing together, of laughing together. His life, now, was one of sterile workshops and silent study. His only companion was an AI of his own creation. His only mentor was an armored monarch who saw praise as an inefficiency. He was growing stronger, smarter, more powerful every day. And he was doing it in a vacuum of profound, absolute isolation. A strange, unfamiliar ache bloomed in his chest. It wasn't envy. Envy was the desire for something you felt you deserved but didn't have. This was different. This was the quiet, hollow recognition of a path not taken, a door he had willingly sealed shut and now could not even find again. It was the ghost of a warmth he would never feel. For a fleeting, terrifying moment, he wasn't the Aegis of doom. He was just Izuku Midoriya, a lonely boy watching his friends from an impossible distance, separated not just by miles, but by a lifetime of choices and an entire dimension. His hand shot out, his mind acting on an impulse his logic could not contain. He slammed his palm against the control panel. The massive holographic screen went black. The roar of the crowd vanished. The workshop was plunged back into its familiar, tomb-like silence, broken only by the low hum of his reactor core. He was left staring at his own reflection, faintly visible on the dark screen. The face of a stranger stared back at him. Older, harder, the last traces of boyish softness planed away by discipline and hardship. A thin scar on his cheek. Eyes that held a chilling stillness. The face of a predator, not a friend. Creator, Aegis's voice spoke in his mind, a calm, intrusive presence. Your biometric readings are anomalous. Heart rate elevated by 22%. Minor fluctuations detected in neurocortical activity consistent with an acute emotional stress response. Do you require a medical diagnostic? Izuku stood up, his chair scraping against the stone floor. His reflection moved with him. He felt exposed. The AI had seen his weakness, the crack in his carefully constructed armor of logic. The data was corrupted, Izuku thought back, his mental voice tight, controlled. Irrelevant emotional noise from the broadcast. It's a non-issue. Understood, Aegis replied, but Izuku could sense the AI flagging the incident, filing it away in some deep recess of its quantum memory. Erase the log of my biometric readings for the last 5 minutes, Izuku commanded, the order sharp and absolute. The data is extraneous, command acknowledged. Erasing log. He turned away from the blank screen, away from the ghost of his reflection. He could not allow this. This feeling. It was a vulnerability. A flaw in his design, the kind of sentimental weakness he had just condemned in Todoroki. It had to be purged. He strode over to his primary workbench, his movements stiff and deliberate. He pulled up his most complex, most demanding project, the schematics for a network of orbital psionic dampeners designed to neutralize large-scale quirk usage over a citywide area. It was a problem of staggering complexity, involving quantum entanglement, arcane geometry, and theoretical physics that would have made Earth's greatest minds weep. It was perfect. He immersed himself in the work, his mind latching onto the pure, clean, beautiful logic of the equations. He forced the memory of Uraraka's laugh out of his head. He replaced the image of his friends with diagrams of power conduits and energy flow. He drowned the unfamiliar ache in his chest with the cold, hard certainty of science. He worked for hours, not stopping to eat or rest, until the first rays of Ladviria's dawn pierced the high windows of his workshop. The schematics were nearly complete. The feeling was gone, buried under layers of work and will, but he knew it wasn't destroyed. It was merely dormant. A ghost in his machine, waiting. He had looked back at the world he'd left behind, and for a moment, its unfamiliar gaze had looked back at him, reminding him that in his quest to become a god, he had sacrificed the simple, messy, beautiful business of being human.